you look at the numbers, always go back to looking at the data. The numbers will 110% always point you in the right direction. And I'm telling you, the opportunity is big, and the amount of businesses taking advantage of this opportunity is very small.
Hey everyone, welcome to the S.O.B Marketing Podcast, where we celebrate the S.O.B that you are, and if you haven't figured it out yet, we mean small-owned business. We don't mean S.O.B.
Listen, we know that as a small business owner, you are working hard on the daily to keep your business fully operational while trying to promote it. And while some days it may feel like the business is owning you, if we're being honest with each other, I bet you would admit that you wouldn't give up the insanity for anything.
Our commitment here at the S.O.B Marketing Podcast is to give you the real talk, what works when it comes to advertising, marketing, promoting your business, and then what doesn't really work.
And Chelsea and I promise to always keep the conversation real.
Welcome back to another episode of the S.O.B Marketing Podcast, and we ain't calling y'all names. S.O.B has in small-owned business, not the other S.O.B. I'm here with my beautiful sister, Chelsea, who happens to also be a professional marketer by trade. And so today, what are we talking about, Chelsea? What kind of good information are we going to be sharing?
So today we are talking about podcasting and whether or not your small business needs a podcast. Vivian, I want to know how you feel about it because, okay, here's the thing. We have a podcast, right? That's what people are listening to right now. There are a lot of podcasts out there. I feel like it's kind of a saturated market. So and here's the thing. When I was doing research for this episode, everyone kept talking about how it's really great advertising, marketing, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. You know, it's affordable, it's effective, it's somewhat easy to do, but I also feel like it is very saturated, and no one brought that up at all.
Yeah, because it's not saturated. Believe it or not.
Okay.
So this is what's interesting. And this in particular, I'd be curious to know what the actual numbers are to podcasting audio only by itself, because what I'm talking about too is whenever, and we can clarify as we have this discussion, there are two things. There is podcasting, and then there is now the video version of podcasting, which a lot of people are doing. And I can tell you that when I've seen the numbers for the video podcasting, there is a ton of opportunity because to us, we're in this world, we think and it feels like it's oversaturated, but it's really not. It's the amount of businesses, the amount of businesses that are actually taking advantage of this opportunity are minimal compared to what it has a capacity for. And I guarantee you, Chelsea, what we see today, I would love to have this same discussion 3 years from now, because the amount of podcasts that we see today that business owners are leveraging to grow their business is just a fraction of what it's going to be here in like 2027, 2028.
Yeah. I don't know. I think part of the problem is, and we've had this discussion on here before, I am very easily like overstimulated. So I think for me, I'm like, there's too many podcasts. There's too much out there. Like, I was like, I don't know if this is such a good idea, but that's a good point. There's a lot of people out there. So
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
I'll give you some big sisterly advice, because y'all, if you guys don't know, I am 15 years older than Chelsea, so we have quite the age difference. I think it's always easy, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion here, because as a small business owner, I think it gets really easy to do exactly what you just said, which is I feel bombarded by the choices that I have when I'm selecting a podcast, and therefore that must equate to it being oversaturated. But when you look at the numbers, always go back to looking at the data. The numbers will 110% always point you in the right direction. And I'm telling you, the opportunity is big, and the amount of businesses taking advantage of this opportunity is very small.
Well, I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because look, podcasting can be a great marketing initiative for your small business. Like Vivian said, it's not oversaturated. Don't listen to me.
Listen to you for some stuff. This
for
one.
some stuff.
Yeah.
Not this one. Yeah. I think sometimes we forget that it's still a marketing initiative and it still takes a lot of effort. It might be affordable and cost effective and easy to do, like simple to do, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. So we want to talk about 4 questions that you need to ask yourself before you decide, okay, I'm going to make a podcast for my small business.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest takeaway today is going to be, we encourage you, just like with every other marketing initiative, to take a good hard look at whether podcasting is the right fit. Is it, like Chelsea said, is it the popular thing to do right now? Absolutely. But if it just doesn't make sense for your small business, then why are you going to start this initiative, right? And if it at the end of the day is not going to translate to sales or to feeding some type of funnel that you have, right, where you're making these touch points to ultimately sell somebody your product or service, then, you know, what are you doing? I think a friendly reminder to everybody, as small business owners, we are not these big actors, actresses, influential public figures that just pop up and spring these podcasts, and then you're going to get like a million views. Like it's podcasting, just like anything else, takes time to build. And so that's where we just want you to be as confident as possible whenever you are going into this initiative, to say, I asked myself these 4 questions. I feel good that it's the right fit for my business, and that if I continue to, you know, work in it, eventually it will convert to benefiting my business.
Yeah, and that's the first question that we want you guys to think about before making that leap, that decision is, you know, how will this help? How will it promote? How will it boost my small business? Because it can seem pretty obvious, and I feel like sometimes we assume that something is going to help, but we don't sit down and really think about, okay, here exactly is how it can help my small business, which is really important. That's something you need to do. You can't just make assumptions that it's going to work.
Yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. I think this is also a little bit outside the box, but okay, there's a gentleman who, I think his name is Raj or something, and not too long ago, Chelsea, back in October, I went to this YouTube vid summit. And so basically it put me in front of other YouTubers and allowed me to meet people that were within that YouTube community. One of the gentlemen, his biggest thing was a podcast. And so the reason he was there, though, is because he actually would do a video version of the podcast that he uploaded on YouTube, and then he would do the other audio on Spotify and all the things. Now, what intrigued me about it is when we're in this small group and we're talking about what we do, he's a plumber by trade. All right.
Okay.
And so I was like, how in the world is a plumber like podcasting, and what does that have to do with plumbing? But the way that he leveraged it is because he had built his company up big enough, he wanted to pivot a little more into doing a lot more of like the franchising stuff. And so therefore he was using the podcast to reach a new audience for him. So it was not the everyday consumer that was going to be calling his business to get their toilet fixed or whatever. It was other plumbers who he eventually wanted to teach to grow their business or to do whatever else. And so that was the mechanism. It was a very strategic way that he was leveraging his podcasting to reach a whole new audience.
I love that. And I think that's a really good point too. Knowing exactly what your podcast is going to be about, y'all, that's like the most important part. And I feel like sometimes people just put stuff together and like, this is going to work. You really need to think this through. I mean, we decided to create this podcast because the Seasoned Marketer, our mission is to be a resource hub for small businesses when it comes to marketing. We want to help you guys feel powerful and confident in your own marketing and do it yourself. So for us, we wanted to give you as much information as we possibly could about marketing your business And a podcast was a great outlet for sharing information. That's how we get all this stuff out. It's an extension of who we are as a brand and a business. So it was very clear to us why we were going to create a podcast. It wasn't just Vivian coming to me and saying, hey, let's create a podcast, because I would have told her no. I'm not just going to.
Would you?
I'm just going to create.
Would you tell your big sister no? Come on.
I mean, again, I said yes because this makes sense to me and I believe in it. If you had come to me and said, let's do a podcast about, I don't know, cooking, I would have been like, absolutely not. I hate cooking.
Can I embarrass you a little bit?
Okay, go ahead.
Chelsea opposes cooking so much, or does it so little, that one time she forgot the word boil.
Yeah.
And she, instead of saying, I boiled the what? I boiled the spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
What did you say?
I say you just melt the spaghetti.
So no, I would never approach you about doing a podcast for cooking, because very clearly
I knew what I meant to say. I just couldn't think of the word boil. You kind of melt it, it gets floppy.
I'm going to melt the spaghetti tomorrow.
Whatever.
So you're absolutely correct in everything that you just said. And there were key points there that I think stuck out to me. It made sense for us because small business owners watch and consume information on many different platforms. Okay. Small business owners sometimes turn to YouTube. Sometimes they turn to Instagram. They also happen to listen to a lot of podcasts, because podcast is the one thing that you can set it and forget it and walk away and be doing whatever else you need to be doing in your business, whether you are folding t-shirts because you own a boutique, or you are sitting there having a look at your bookkeeping and you're streaming a podcast while you're doing it. I mean, it's a very good avenue that small business owners use. And so it made sense for us, because on top of those other things that we're doing, if we could infiltrate and reach them through audio or even through the video version on YouTube, then that works great. Additionally, you mentioned that having a really firm grasp on what type of information you're sharing is great. Why do you think crime podcasts do so well? Okay, because that's the one place people want to go to listen to all things murderous, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you cannot, and because podcasting does require, I'm just going to be upfront and tell you guys, there is no way we could literally just set up the mics, turn on a camera, and talk about something that's meaningful. That doesn't just happen authentically unless you've been doing it for a long time and you already have a follower base. At the end of the day, you're trying to reach a certain target audience, and you have to talk about the things that interest them, right? I've seen a couple examples. I'm not going to name names. I've seen a couple examples where people are they've gotten a small group of friends together and they're like, I'm so excited to share, to get people together, and we're going to start this podcast. They do 3 episodes and then they're done, because they're like, what else do we talk about, or what? So it's got to make sense for your target audience and for your business. And also you want to talk about stuff,
Absolutely.
There's we would not be talking about, I was going to say crocheting, but I mean, you know how to crochet. I do not. So we could possibly talk about
I know how to crochet. We could possibly. I'm not a pro like Mom. Mom and I could create a crocheting podcast, because she's good
maybe
at that
you should.
stuff. She crocheted me a skirt once.
Did she? So cute. I almost thought you said, would you say it's not impossible? I almost thought you said it's not impossible.
I did not say that.
Do you love making crafts and working on your small business but struggle to get them in front of customers?
Do craft fairs, events, or pop-ups leave you feeling overwhelmed or frustrated?
Introducing Rock Your Fair, the course designed to help you succeed in the world of craft fairs, pop-ups, and events, created by 2 marketing professionals with over 15 years of experience. Rock Your Fair is perfect for anyone who's new to the game or just wants to step up their game.
Our step step-by-step approach will guide you through everything you need to know, from choosing the right events, to setting up your booth, to marketing your products effectively.
And you know what? You'll also get access to us for personalized coaching and feedback so you can put your best foot forward.
Do not let craft fairs, pop-ups, and events hold you back. Sign up for Rock Your Fair today and start rocking your way to success.
For a limited time, get access to our free mini course. Simply head over to our website at www.theseasonedmarketer.com and click on workshops.
Okay, a little bit of a tangent, but it's going to be super helpful for you to also find a key difference, a selling point, something that makes you stand out, right? So let's think about the true crime category. There's a lot of podcasts out there. So how do these podcasts set themselves apart? Well, True Crime Obsessed. Vivian and I listened to that. The way that True Crime Obsessed did it is that they specifically watch documentaries and series and movies and stuff like that. And then they do a synopsis of what they watch. Now, it's all true crime stuff, so it's still true crime, but that's how they're specifically doing it. And that makes them stand out from someone like Crime Junkie.
Right. Well, and I think too, the style of the presentation makes them stand out too. The reason I really got hooked on True Crime Obsessed years ago was because I like the dynamic of the two hosts. And also I like the fact that there was a lot of laughing. And I say that in the utmost respect. We all know that crime is not funny, especially when there are people affected. But the way that they were presenting it, because like what Chelsea said, is they're not reviewing the actual case. They're reviewing the documentary on the case. And so the documentary sometimes they present information in such a weird way that sometimes it allows for them to be able to joke about it and be like, I probably would have presented that a little differently, right? Or they'll say, I really don't like so-and-so in this documentary because they seem like an a-hole, right? So I think because it meshed the humor with the style, like you're saying, and it presented something so unique and different that even for some of the other true crime stuff that I listen to, I've yet to find one that has the same vibe and the same style of it.
Absolutely. I mean, the difference between Crime Junkie and True Crime Obsessed, like I listen to both of them, but I listen to Crime Junkie like when it's raining outside and
it's
I'm
a
in
little
a
more
mood
somber
and stuff like that. I listen to Yeah, exactly. And I listen to True Crime Obsessed because I want to laugh. They're hilarious. They're so funny.
And so we're hoping, one of the things, if you think about what we're doing here with this podcast, marketing, it's not exactly a topic that people are like, let me sign up and listen to that right now, right? So it's one of those things, though, that is it's needed from a small business perspective. But the reason that we also decided that podcasting was going to be a good fit for the Seasoned Marketer is because a lot of the videos that we upload on the YouTube, the Seasoned Marketer channel, are way more, say it.
I thought you were just going to say the YouTube. Like what we upload on the YouTube. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. Why are you talking like that?
Valley Girl, hello.
Sorry.
On that specific YouTube channel that we have, a lot of it is tutorials, a little more, I don't want to say buttoned up, but it's a little more, it just feels like an educational video as opposed to anything that is laid back conversational. And so that was this avenue or this outlet allowed for Chelsea and I to show up. And what we said is, hey, how do we want to approach these marketing topics? Do we want to just write notes, come in here, talk about it, just go through the notes? No, we want to have some dialogue about it. And the thing is, because Chelsea and I do have that age gap and we are both professional marketers, while we're able to agree on almost everything when it comes to marketing, we have very differing views because we have two very different personalities. And so I think that's where you and I had made the conscious decision when we started that we wanted it to be something that was not going to be stuffy, but was going to be a little more low key. And
so back on track. We're giving you questions that you need to ask yourself before you decide you want to get into podcasting. So first one was, how will this help, promote, boost my small business? Second one, do I have the time to be consistent? Ooh, girl, I feel like this is the most important one because let me tell you, podcasting is not hard, but it's a lot of effort.
You have to make a conscious decision to show up, just like anything else. If you're using Instagram, and Chelsea and I just have a hate relationship with Instagram. It's not even a love-hate relationship, okay? So we'd be talking about that girl all the time.
From a business standpoint, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's great for memes. I love all the memes on Instagram, but from a business perspective.
Yeah, let me tell you, but killing me.
That's
like a whole other conversation.
Exactly. Just like you're using those platforms, whether it be an Instagram or you're showing up on Facebook Live, or perhaps you love TikTok and you're using TikTok to promote your business. It requires some level of consistency, and podcasting is no different. Now, we're not telling you that you have to do a weekly podcast. What we are saying, though, is that you want to evaluate and see what you are willing to commit to, especially if you're just starting out and the time thing is kind of weird for you. Then maybe you do a monthly episode or a bi-weekly episode, right? So every 2 weeks you release a new one, but don't commit to something that you're not going to keep up with, because it's just going to be self-defeating. And then it's going to make you dislike podcasting when you truly have no beef with podcasting. It's a disappointment in yourself, right? And not keeping to a schedule.
And you need to really understand the type of time that you're going to have to commit to this. So we have to come up with a topic. We have to sit down, write some notes. I mean, we don't go verbatim for the notes, but we also need like a guideline, like an outline for what we're going to talk about. Make sure we hit all the points. We have to actually sit down and record it. I go in and edit all of it. Then I send it to you to make sure I didn't do anything wrong.
That sounded a little salty to me. I go in there and edit.
No. Well, my point was I go in and edit it, but I still send it to you because I need someone to also watch it, because there's been a bunch of times where you've been like, hey, girl, actually, at this point, the screen goes black. And I'm like, great, now I got to fix this. So maybe you have to re-edit it. Then you have to upload it. Like, it's a lot of time-consuming things. So, again, we're not saying don't do it. But if you're going to commit to it, make sure that you're committing to a consistency that you can actually keep up with. I really love the idea of maybe like a monthly podcast, especially for a small business.
Especially if you want to do the other part that we're not even.
Ooh.
What?
I'm sorry, I just thought of this. If you're a bookstore, you could do like a monthly, like these are our employees, like top
favorite
books
picks
for the month. This is what we read this month and absolutely loved. Yes, a monthly one. I'd totally listen to that. I listened to Book of the Day from NPR.
What is that? Just a review of like a...
So they just review a book every single day.
I mean, true to its title.
Yeah. They talk about a book every single day.
So here's what's interesting is we yes, and yes to everything you just said. And we're not even talking about if you're going to have guests on your podcast, the amount of coordination that's required for guest podcasting, plus you being sure that the audio is working correctly and all of that. And so I think those are the things where maybe it's not a bad idea that you do what Chelsea's saying. If you are not sure how much time you're going to be able to commit, but you want to do podcasting, and just remember, you get way more efficient the more you practice something and the more you do something. At this point, for Chelsea and I, we know the topic ahead of time because we have a running list that Chelsea keeps track of ideas. Whenever she gets ideas, or maybe we're having a side conversation and she's like, hey, that'd be really good for us to cover in a podcast, she puts it in a document and she has a running list of those. And then she'll say, hey, for the next 2 or 3, here are the topics. And that way she starts to populate that information because we want to be sure that the data, the statistics is correct, and anything that's relevant, that's new, gets included in there. But that all takes time. And then, like she said, that's not even the part, that's all before we hit record. All right. So then if we have someone, we figured out at this point the audio stuff, it's really quick. We set up the webcam, we do this and that. Now, if we're going to a podcast studio, which we've floated the idea around, because here locally there is one we may be able to use, that's a whole other thing where we're going to have to spend probably a good hour beforehand to make sure we know how the equipment works, because it's not something that we do on a week-to-week basis. So I think that's the thing where people forget. You're trying something new. It's going to feel awkward the first couple of times, but then you get in a groove. So do a monthly, figure out how much time it's taking, do maybe a couple of those. And then if you're ready to graduate to posting every 2 weeks or every week, then commit to it. But the reason the consistency is important is think about your patterns. If you listen to a podcast, which I'm sure 95% of you listening to this do, you look forward to the next episode.
They have to if they're listening to this. They have to listen to podcasts if they're listening to this. This is a podcast.
I meant if you're listening to like podcast as a, maybe they've stumbled. I can't really. Okay, so listen, the point I was trying to make.
You were on a roll. I'm sorry.
The point I was trying to make is that if I think about the podcast that I like tuning into week to week or, month to month, I look forward to them posting a new podcast. And so I like knowing what that frequency is, because then I can, log in on Spotify and listen to the latest episode. So that's the reason you're wanting to establish that relationship with your audience. The frequency will help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So
thanks for blowing my spot up, little sis.
Let's go.
Use the best.
I'm sorry. You said it and I was like, wait a second. So the next question we want you guys to be asking yourselves is, remember, podcasting is going to be another marketing initiative for you, for your small business. Is there a different marketing initiative that would be more effective to reaching that goal that you're trying to reach with a podcast?
Yeah. And what do you mean by more effective? You're talking about like, would something be better off than a podcast for what you're trying to accomplish?
Yes. So remember, you want a very specific goal. For example, our goal is to give small business owners like as much information as possible about each of our marketing topics. That's why we're having a conversation about it on a podcast. If your goal is teaching your consumer how to use your product, maybe a podcast, or maybe you just want to do a video series on YouTube instead of a full-on podcast. Like, just really thinking about, okay, this is the goal, this is what I'm trying to achieve. Is podcasting going to be the most effective thing I can do?
Yeah. And
does that make sense?
It does. And what really for us, I think the trigger point was, for one, we knew a lot of small business owners utilize podcasts to get information. And on top of it, whenever we're a little different in the sense that, yes, we have products and stuff, but ultimately for us, there's a lot of value in getting somebody onto our mailing list and kind of into our sphere of the seasoned marketer world, right? So the podcast was an avenue for us to reach small business owners and then feed them back into the resources that we have under the seasoned marketer umbrella. So it was an extension of that. For example, we have a friend who owns a business called Lounge With Us. And basically the premise is she has a lot of she just opened her storefront last year, right, Chelsea? We went to her opening out on Folly.
Yep.
And
it was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so she carries a lot of like lounge wear. It's specific to women. She carries lounge wear stuff that's comfy, that you can travel and do all that stuff. She also does bra fittings, right? I guess she's a professional bra fitter. And so that's a very big deal for women to get their sizing done correctly. If, let's say, she wanted to consider a podcast, for one, it would make sense for her because she has the ability to do online sales. All right. And so that doesn't keep her in her storefront just here in the Low Country. So she's able to, if someone tunes in Arizona, she'd be able to sell to them just as much, right? They'd be able to go check out and get their stuff shipped. What doesn't really make sense for me sometimes is if you're a business that's so locally based and ultimately sales is your goal, you're kind of always tapped out as far as who your audience base is, who can purchase from you. But for her, it makes a whole lot of sense. The other part of it too is because she's doing something a little different with a very niche down segment of women wear. So whether that's bra fitting or the lounge stuff, she could always relate that back to empowering women or to bringing guests on to speak to each of these things, right? So I think that's where a podcast for a boutique like hers would make a lot of sense just because she's not limited to that geographic area.
I didn't know you could be a professional bra fitter.
Yeah, like
that's a thing.
I don't know if it's like a course or some type of educational thing that you take. And so, it's a pretty big deal. People say that it helps a whole lot whenever, instead of going to like a department store and kind of just trying things on, they actually will tell you what your size is and make sure that the bra you purchase is fitted correctly to you.
Cool. So our last question that we want you guys to ask yourself is, how am I going to measure whether this initiative, this podcast is working? We talk about it all the time. Look at your data. Just because you're making a podcast doesn't make that any different.
There are so many different ways that you can do this too. And besides looking at the analytics that the podcasting platforms give you, I would also say that one of the things you could do is, like, we actually have a separate website for our podcast. And the reason we did that is because, for one, I really like this platform, the ease. It auto-populates the latest episodes, so you're not having to manually upload it into WordPress or anything. So that gives you added exposure from the SEO side on web. And then on top of it, it's another place for you to kind of start to build a separate audience. So because we have the Seasoned Marketer and we have the S.O.B marketing podcast, our hope is that both of these kind of, overlap or go into the other. So if you find us on the podcast, that eventually you'll go to our YouTube channel, right? And watch our marketing videos. Or if you find us on YouTube, on the Seasoned Marketer, that then you'll realize, hey, they have a podcast and I'll go check it out. And so I think the thing there is, because we have that separate website built, we're able to look at those analytics. Additionally, we're able to look at the analytics from YouTube when Chelsea's uploading the video version of each one of these episodes. And if you wanted to create a separate web page, or let's say like a link in bio type of web site for it, you could, and you can use those analytics. But looking at where people are clicking and where they're coming from is extremely important.
I mean, looking at the number of listens and follower count, yes, you want to look at that stuff too. But you really want to look at sorry, your
my
chicken.
Rooster.
Oh, your rooster.
He likes to hang
in the
out.
background.
Yeah, every time I do a podcast episode, he just wants to hang out. You hear him?
Yeah. He has things to say, I guess. Okay. What I was gonna say is, Wow, so much like a man that he has to talk while two women are talking. Okay.
Right on cue.
He didn't like that I said that. Okay, going back to what I was saying. Yes, you want to look at the number of listens and the follower count. Those are the standard, but just like you're saying, you want to look at so much more than just that, because you want to see, again, your goal. Is this working? Are people going to my website? Are people going from the podcast to my online store? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I realized when I was saying all that, I was still talking a lot about the analytics related to the podcast, but really you're right. The thing is, you have to develop other mechanisms for being able to see if the episode is actually driving stuff to your freebies, downloads, email list,
Yep.
or to your actual sales. And so some of the ways that you can do that is if you're offering a specific download just for podcast listeners, or if on the back end you are able to pull the analytics to see where people are coming from. So what I mean by this is YouTube does this really great thing where on the back end, when I'm looking at analytics for a video, it tells me exactly what website they're coming from. So if they're coming from Facebook, it tells me that. If they're coming from, and that helps you to put two and two together as far as what's leading people there. But you can come up with creative ways to track this so that way you understand, hey, I ended up growing my email list to 500 people because of the podcast.
Okay, Vivian, so let's do a real quick synopsis. What are the questions that we're asking small business owners to ask themselves before they decide they should be podcasters?
All right. How will podcasting help your small business, right? So how will it actually do something to grow your audience or grow your sales? Do you have time to be consistent with it? Is there another marketing initiative that could be more effective than podcasting? And how are you going to measure the success of podcasting in your small business?
I love it. I really think if you ask yourself those 4 questions and you have clear, concise answers, then you'll be able to definitively say, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to create a podcast, or no, thank you. Never mind. What I really just wanted to do is have other people listen to my friends' conversations, but that's probably not the best idea.
Yeah. Thumbs up.
It did it again.
What I just like with anything else, I think it's just a good overall reminder as small business owners. We all have the tendency to get caught up in these trends or the new shiny things that come out with technology and with consumer behavior, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that it's worth your time. And so Chelsea and I just want to encourage you to give it way more thought. And if podcasting has been something that you've been considering after you do this, regardless of if you decide to move forward with it, we certainly would love to hear about it. So tell us if you guys have launched a podcast or will be launching a podcast here in 2024. So that way we can subscribe for one and also tune in.
I would love that. Okay, well, I think this was a great, informative episode, Vivian. All you small business owners out there, if you know another small business owner that does not listen, but probably should be listening, go ahead and send them our way. We are the S.O.B Marketing Podcast. We are a part of the Seasoned Marketer. So if you haven't checked out the Seasoned Marketer, go check that out. You can find it at www.theseasonedmarketer.com. We have a lot of resources, tons of YouTube videos, tutorials, all that good stuff. So just make sure that you're finding all the information you need for your marketing and go be the best SOB you can be.